Chapter number 26 of The Greenstone Door by William Satchell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 26. The Greenstone Door. From that moment until, as one who wakes from sleep, I looked around me in the woods below Porongia, well nigh a year later, I can tell you nothing of my own knowledge. It is from what has been related to me by Roma, by sundry natives, but for the most part one other informant, that I derive what is here written of that time. With the fall of Urukau ended the war in the Waikato. Peace was established shortly afterwards, and those natives whose homes did not come within the confiscation boundary returned to their settlements. Among the rest came the villages of Matakiki, still numerous in men past middle age, and women and children, but sadly depleted of young braves. The house was reopened, and here Roma and I dwelt during the whole of the time of which I write. For my part, the place was a home only in so far as I made use of one at all, for there were days and even weeks together when my shadow never darkened its doorway, and the wild birds alone knew my sleeping place. I suffered from no bodily ailment. It was only when my recollection of the past was touched at some point that there was much in my actions to distinguish me from normal men. The central idea in my clouded mind seems to have been that I was still on my way to the British lines, or rather that I had escaped from the custody of the idiot and was now alternately concealing myself from him and seeking the recovery of that lost intention which had incited my escape. This could scarcely have been so had I not continued to be aware, however hazily, of my identity. Perhaps it was the partial recovery of this lost intention which brought me back time and again to my home. And yet, arrived there, I asked no questions, and seemed to be without anticipations with regard to it. Abroad, my travels were never to or over the actual scenes of my journey with the idiot, but veered continuously in the direction of Porongia, so that with the main motive appears to have mingled another, of which I can offer no explanation, unless it is to be found in the fascination the mountain had always possessed for me. I have often wondered if it was some blessed instinct that urged me thus into the wilds, far from the haunts and taunts of men, that made of me a solitary wanderer, braving all weathers, careless of rain and storm, of the damp earth that formed my couch, sleeping with the sun and rising with it, till the health of a wild animal pervaded my body, and the cloud lifted and passed away from my brain. Conceive of me, then, as a creature of the woods and mountains, capable of thought and speech, harmless, timid, self-centred in my idea that I had escaped the idiot, and so let the autumn pass and the winter, let spring be far advanced into summer. And now behold me, standing stock still, my feet on the forest trail, bereft of the power of motion, watching the approach of the being I had so long successfully avoided. When he was but the creature of my imagination, the wild bird was not swifter in flight than I, but now that I beheld him in the flesh, the power of movement failed me, and abjectly I waited recapture. It was he. I knew him less by his appearance than by the stirring of my blood that stood to me for remembrance. I doubted not that it was in order to allay my fears that he had disguised himself in the attire of a woman, and now, with swift movements, interrupted by sudden pauses, he drew near to me, and, staring on me with great eyes, breathlessly spoke my name. "Cedric!" "Yes, idiot, it is I. Now take me, for I see I cannot escape you. Where shall I take you? To the General. Have you forgotten the Black One's instructions? If it must be done, let us go quickly. Wait here a while, for I am tired. I have followed you a long way. Let us sit here and rest. Cedric, Cedric, O God, be merciful. See what I have brought with me in my basket. I know, pah, but you have lost the kite's talon. Bread and butter and a fowl. I got Roma to cook it for you, and here is some peaches, the first fruits of the orchard. There, you wouldn't think, would you, that these little things were so heavy? Now you must find us some water. It is your place to fetch and carry, I said, and threw myself on the ground before the good things. Yes, I will fetch it. That is the beauty of New Zealand. There is always water close at hand. I passed the creek not 2 minutes ago. I lay still till the sounds of footsteps had died away. Then, quickly restoring the food to its place in the basket, I picked it up and ran at full speed down the trail. I had put several miles between us before, delighted with my ruse, I sat down to enjoy my meal. In that hour my fear of the idiot began to wane. I had successfully outwitted him. His strength, had he not spoken of the flimsy basket of food as heavy, no longer impressed me. I moved more carelessly, with the result that 3 or 4 days later I was captured again. Apricots this time, Cedric. How long is it since you have been home? And the flower garden is just a picture. Come and sit down. We won't need any water until we have finished. That was cruel of you, and I have been looking for you every day since. Then sit further off. It is not fitting that we should be such near neighbours. As you please, eat, and I will wait upon you. I was thy neighbour once, thou rugged pile. Wordsworth? What do you know of Wordsworth? Wordsworth, I repeated, frowning. Wordsworth. He was a chief of the Ngāpuhi, and I began to carve the fowl into 2 portions. Then what does he mean by rugged pile? A pile, creature, said I, is the block used for the support of a food store to preserve its contents from rats. And I smiled contentedly at this ingenious elucidation of a remembrance that had puzzled me. Is that for me? But I don't want it. You need not have stolen the basket, for it was yours. Eat, I insisted. We have a long way to travel, and heaven knows if our next meal may not be the heart of a nikau. Footnote: Nikau, the native palm, Areca sapida. End of footnote. The creature made so poor a pretence of obeying me that my fear suffered a further relapse. I remembered having seen him take a bird from the spit ere the fire had well warmed it, and devoured it, scarcely troubling to discard the bones, but he was strangely altered. Eat, I urged again. Though you may not sit at my table, you may divide my fare, and in a few moments we must start on our journey. Cedric, will you come home with me? What need of a better home than this? Here is shelter from the sun and rain, wood for fire, and soft bedding for our limbs. But food, how do you exist and keep your strength? Often you must suffer from the need of it. Come, and we will go back together. When I feel hunger, it is a simple business to satisfy it. I have but to walk into a village at morning or evening, and take potluck with my friends. Why should I travel many miles for what I can obtain close at hand? East, west, home's best. Listen, Cedric, do you remember St. Kevin's? I detest memory. It gives me a headache. Ah, but you remember the poet Wordsworth. Do you remember the garden and the narcissus flower, the boy who died of love of his image in the water, and the host of golden daffodils? Don't frown at me. Think. In the garden there are 2 children, a boy and a girl. They are standing looking down at the flowers. Now they have moved on. They are on a seat, talking together of the past that still lives and the future that is to be born. Look, you can see them. It is winter time, but the sun is shining. It is a pretty story, idiot, I said, but I could never understand why she ceased to love him. I remember now that you were right with regard to Wordsworth, and I am sorry that I threw your claw into the fire. He drew back and looked at me disconsolately. Why do you call me idiot? Was that too among the terrors? Again he leaned forward, and in his voice was a wonderful seduction. Call me by my name. If I ever heard it, I have forgotten long since, I replied. What is your name? Helenora. I told you that I detested memories. Now my head is splitting. Tell it me again. Helenora Wilde. You are jesting with me. I suppose you think that I don't know that I'm as mad as you are, but you cannot delude me into the belief that you were christened by a woman's name. No more a woman's name than I am a woman. Oh, Cedric, open your eyes. Was the idiot clothed as I am? Was his face like mine? Had he such hands? Hesitatingly, I took the white hand she stretched out to me, and scanned the soft palms and lissom fingers. Mad, I muttered. Yet who was Helenora? She was the girl in the garden, the girl who, thinking of the past, consented to the future. But why did she cease to love him? If I could remember that. You must not remember that, for it never was. She always loved him. And your name is Helenora? Yes, and you were the boy in the garden. Oh, Cedric, if you but will it, you may awake. Suddenly she drew her hands from mine, and throwing herself on her knees, raised them in supplication to heaven. Merciful God, she cried, have pity on me and on this afflicted one. Forgive my wickedness. Let his memory be restored to him. Prayer is good, I said approvingly, and knelt down before her. Hear me, Father in heaven, for those wrongs I have committed, pardon me, and let not your wrath continue against me. Lift this cloud from my mind, so that I may be as other men. Her eyes, shining with tears, searched my face expectantly. Ah, don't frown at me, she cried at last. It is not my displeasure, I said. If your head ached as mine does, you would frown too. See, while we have been talking, the sun has gone down. She stood a while, looking musingly about her in the golden twilight. Have you a place to sleep, or do you just lie down anywhere? She asked presently. Come, I will show you, and I led her to a cave in the rocks. Probably I had more than one such retreat, but this is the only one of which I have learned. It contained a small store of food, potatoes and kumeras, and a thin mist of smoke rose from my covered cooking fire. In a few minutes the hot embers were coaxed into a blaze, but the pain in my head had now become intolerable, and sick to death, I could do no more. Giddy and half blind, I groped my way to the cave and sank into my couch of fern fronds. Cedric, shall I put some water on your head? We did not need the fire. There is a beautiful moon. The forest is a carving in silver and ebony. Never mind the cloth, just your hands, and say some of Wordsworth's poems. But your head will get worse. No matter, there is one on the verge of memory. I should know it in a moment. Not that one, nor that one. Can you tell me one line of it? One word? I should know it. Are you sure it was Wordsworth? Suddenly her voice checked, and then, as one who recovered a memory, Wie ein Gebild, Ust Himmel schön, sieht du Jungfrau vor sich stehen. Yes, yes. O zarte Sehnsucht, süßes Hoffen, der ersten Liebe goldene Zeit, das Auge sieht den Himmel offen, es schwellt das Herz in Seligkeit. Cedric. And softly again, Cedric, and the silence and the moonlit night. And in God's good time, and at the call of love, I awoke, and my madness had passed and left no vestige in memory. I stared at the cave and the bush beyond. The sun was well up in the sky. A golden beam slanted to the entrance of my retreat, and down it, as an angel of heaven might come to the gateway of death, came Hellenora. The day was well advanced as, hand in hand, we turned our backs on Pirongia and followed the trail for home, through the golden lights and leafy shadows of the bush. And they are all dead save Roma, and the war is at an end. Ah, Cedric, if you have lost all, so have I. Didn't you hear that Arthur was killed at Rangiriri? I drew her to a standstill and kissed the tears from her eyes. You remember, I said, the image of the Greenstone Door? She nodded and lifted her lips mutely to mine. And so at last, for us two also, the Greenstone Door was closed. End of chapter 26. End of the Greenstone Door by William Satchell. The Glossary of the Greenstone Door by William Satchell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Glossary. Ariki, the priest chief. See note. Atua, a spirit, God. Haere mai, welcome. Haere ra, farewell. Hangi, food cooked in a Maori oven. Hapu, a sub-tribe. Huia, a bird. Hetera locha acutirostris. Kai, food. Kainga, the home. Kaiwai, the floor of a canoe. Kakino, bad. Karaka, a tree. Kauri, the great New Zealand pine tree. Kehua, a ghost. Kiritangata, the innermost barricade. Kiwi, the wingless apteryx. Koe, korua, koto, you two, all of you. Kowhai, a tree. Kumara, the sweet potato. Makutu, magic. Mana, authority, prestige. Manuka, the tea tree. Marae, the village common. Maro, an apron. Matai, a tree. Matakiti, second sight. Miri, a stone or jade club. Morpork, the settler's name for the native owl. Nikau, a species of palm. Nu, divining rods. Noa, cleansed from tapu. Pa, a fortified village. See note. Pai, good. Pakiha, a white man. Pakiha Maori, a white man living as a Maori. Papatia, an untattooed person. Patu, strike. Piko, a pack carried on the back. Pounamu, jade, greenstone. Pupurangi, a species of large snail. Rangatira, a chief. Tiranga, the land of shades. See note. Rongo Pai, the good word. Runanga, a parliament. Taipo, a supernatural being. Taniwha, a fabulous saurian monster. Tapairu, a high priestess. See note. Tapu, sacred, infected. See note. Te rairi, a tree. Tatou, a door. Taua, a war party. Tawhara, the flower spathe of a climbing plant. Tikai tango atua, the undertaker. Tenaque, korua, koto, singular, dual, and plural greeting. Titeri, a war trumpet. Tiki, a breast ornament. Tiitoki, a tree. Tohanga, see note. Tohanga ta, a tattooer. Tui, the parson bird. Tutua, a slave. Umu, an oven of heated stones. Uto, vengeance. Utu, payment in compensation. Wahine, wife or womenfolk. Waipiro, alcoholic beverage. Waiata, a song. Whare, a native house. Wharekura, the Māori University. Whare Mātoro, the Māori pleasure house. Whare Puni, the sleeping house. End of the glossary. Notes for The Greenstone Door by William Satchell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Notes. Ariki, the priest chief, the eldest son of the eldest son, tracing descent back to the Māori gods. Pa, a fortified village. It was usually situated on the summit of a hill, so as to command a view of an approaching enemy. Its defences consisted of ditches and palisades, one within the other. Te Renga, the world of spirits. The soul, having quitted the body, was supposed to travel to the extreme north of New Zealand, where was the leaping off place or entrance to the land of shadows. See Chapter 5. The royal huia bird. The tail feathers of the huia, black tipped with white, were highly prized as hair ornaments. See Chapter 3. The Southern Cross, one of the two newspapers published in Auckland at that date, adopted a tone highly antagonistic to the governor. It is said, however, that Gray never read it. See Chapter 12. Te Pairu, the firstborn of an exalted lineage of the female sex, a high priestess. Tapu, Mr. Tregar, to whose valuable work The Māori Race I am much indebted, says, "The true inwardness of the word is that it infers the setting apart of certain persons or things on account of their having become possessed or infected by the presence of supernatural beings, particularly of the ancestral spirits who were guardian deities of the tribe. The reverse of tapu is noa, cleansed from tapu, common. Tatau ponamu. This figurative expression was used to denote the making of a lasting peace. The Greenstone Door, through which war and rapine might enter, was conceived to be finally closed with those making the compact. It was the most sacred bond of peace to a people whose chief delight was in war. See Chapter 5. Tohunga. The tohunga was the master of arts and sciences, or trades. the teacher, the priest, and the physician, though not all of these were combined in the same person. Common usage has considerably reduced the scope of the word, and the tohunga nowadays is merely a rather discredited medicine man and religious mystic. End of notes.